All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just welcome. We've got a few participants. Hopefully, we'll have a few more joining us as we go. But I appreciate you taking the time to come out on a Sunday to talk about the exciting topic of roads and ditches. Obviously, we're here to talk about the road improvement proposal that's on the November 3rd ballot. And basically, what I'll do is I'll present some background information. And then talk specifically about what's on the ballot and what that means, and what other kinds of processes and procedures we have baked around the ballot initiative, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end. Right now, everybody's mics are muted, so I'm going to go through the presentation in its totality, and then at the end I'll provide some instructions on how you can participate in the question and answer session, or if you just want to make comments, that's fine too. So first thing, hope everybody is safe and healthy. I know we've got the whole COVID thing going on, and I hope everybody's enduring this kind of new unique paradigm that we're living under with respect to COVID. And speaking of COVID, back in March, the Infrastructure Committee, we had a pretty serious discussion as to whether or not we wanted to move forward, with developing a potential proposal, not knowing what the future 8 months later in November was going to look like, both economically, health-wise, and so forth. We didn't know whether the economy would be better or worse, but what we thought was the worst thing that we could do is to do nothing. And then get 8 months down the road and things were, better or okay, and not have a proposal for the ballot. And I'm kind of glad we did move forward because, at least relative to March, things are a little better. We're obviously not out of the woods. Things aren't back to normal by any stretch. But ultimately, what we, decided was that we wanted to let the residents decide. Put something on the ballot, see if they like the proposal. If they think the time is right, then they would vote for it, and if not, they don't. So obviously we've got something on the ballot for the residents to look at. Last year, as I think everybody knows, we had a very comprehensive proposal on the ballot that was voted down, and our postmortem analysis, kind of indicated that the two biggest complaints around that proposal was, that it was first too costly. And second of all, too extreme, in terms of the amount of road that we were going to repair. And, people felt that not that much road didn't need to be repaired. So we went back to the drawing board, and the infrastructure team has been working hard since the last election in November. I think we've had, about 8 meetings. We had great turnout at those meetings. So if there's one good thing about a contentious election is it puts a spotlight on the issue, so residents became very engaged. We had a great turnout at the meetings, kind of the turnout that we had hoped for the previous year, but we did get great turnout. We got a lot of great suggestions from the residents, a lot of great ideas, and we incorporated those into multiple potential plans. We developed three plans in total, and then we vetted those plans through some town halls. Some of you may remember we had town halls back in the April-May timeframe to get input on those plans, see what residents liked about them and what they did and didn't like about them. And then we deliberated as a committee and narrowed it down to the one plan that we felt would be best for the city. We recommended that to City Council. City Council approved it, and it ended up on the ballot. So the one thing that I do want to stress is that, throughout the meeting process that we had to develop this plan, I stressed to the committee on multiple occasions, some of the perceptions that the residents had from last November, because I think it was very important for us as a committee to kind of have that at the forefront as we deliberated, so that we could try to address as many of the perceptions, that residents had about the prior plan. And, there were a lot of perceptions. Some of them were true, some of them were false. But there were things like, the cost is too high, the proposal wasn't fair to new residents, the project cost needs to be split more evenly between residents so that you're not having, one resident paying 3 times as much as another resident. There wasn't enough time for input. The process was rushed. 19 years for payback was too long. We were doing too many roads. Some sections didn't want their dirt roads being done. The city should have enough money from taxes to fix the roads, things like that. And so I did, regularly remind the committee of those things so that we would keep them, in mind while we were deliberating and try to address as many of those concerns and perceptions, as we possibly could. So the first thing I want to do, though, is actually thank the committee for their hard work. The committee members, I think, 3 of the 4, I think, are online right now. The committee members were Hugo Cardenas, Joe Robinson, Mike Griffin, and Mike Keenan, and they put in a lot of hard work. Had lots of great ideas and suggestions, and we used all that to develop the proposal that we have. And I also want to thank the advisors. We had several advisors who helped us out a lot. Cheryl Mitchell, who's on the call, she's our city administrator. Scott Ringler, our city engineer, who's also on the call if there are questions that people have at the end for him. Salim Siddiqui, another one of our council members. Scott Baker, our city attorney, and then the Budzinski Group, which was our bond consultant. So they all did a great job at advising us and answering our questions, and again helping us come up with the final proposal that's on the ballot. So the overarching question to kind of start out is, why do we need this? Why do we need a ballot proposal for our roads? And, obviously, if you live in Lathrup or you've driven around Lathrup, you know that the roads are not in great shape. Lots of the roads are cracked. They're full of potholes. The city gets regular reports of car damage. We get, they're unsightly. When you have uneven, damaged roads, there are safety issues. And then, we also have the issue of the fact that our roads are degenerating, or I should say the rate of degeneration is actually accelerating. In other words, the roads are getting worse, and they're getting worse faster. And the reason why is because we can only afford as a city to fix about 0.4 miles of roadway per. Sorry, trying to fix my screen here. Just went weird. Hang on one second. Yeah, so we can only, as a city, afford to fix about 0.4 miles of road a year traditionally. And actually this year, we didn't do a road project because we couldn't afford it. And so, but at that traditional rate of about 0.4 miles a year, given the fact that we have 26 and a half, residential road miles in Lathrup, it's going to take us 63 years to get to all the roads, and that's not a tenable solution, as I'm sure you would all agree. So the roads are in bad shape. Our ditches as well are also in bad shape. We all know that if you have a moderate rain, the ditches fill up. They tend to not drain. A lot of times what will happen is the ditches fill up and they overflow onto the sidewalks and onto people's driveway approaches. Sometimes it takes days, even up to weeks, for certain ditches to empty out after a rain. And so we end up getting our sidewalks get damaged from the water, as do our driveway approaches. It provides fresh water for all the rodents, which is one of the reasons why we've had such a big rodent explosion over the last decade or so. And most importantly, what it does is it also damages the road structure. So when that water sits in the ditches, it's got nowhere to go, so it starts to seep underneath the roadway, and it damages the roadway from underneath. So not only do we get degradation from on top, but it also gets damaged from below, and we don't get the full life out of our roads. So the ditches are obviously a problem as well. And so the idea behind this proposal is to fix the roads, and then through some other processes that we'll talk about also fix the ditches. Okay, so that's why we need this. In terms of how we got in this situation, now last year, as some of you may remember, I did about a half-hour presentation that went into a lot of detail about the factors that got us into this situation. I'm not going to do that again, but what I will do is a quick overview. So for people who attended the sessions last year, this will serve as a quick refresher. And if you haven't attended these sessions before, it'll kind of give you an intro into how we got here. And if you want more information about how we got here or anything to do with the proposal, you can always go to fixlvroads.com. So that's fix, F-I-X-L-V for Lathrup Village Roads, fixlvroads.com. That's a website that we've set up that has a wealth of information, everything I'm going to talk about and more about the road proposal. And so you can find out things there. One of the things that we have there is actually a 25-minute video that goes into all the detail goes into a lot more detail about what I'm going to talk about next, if you have that interest. So, but that said, the question is, why is it that we can't maintain the roads like we used to do, 25, 30 years ago? And I think the answer to that question is pretty obvious. It's money. We just don't have it. And this isn't an issue that's unique to Lathrup. I mean, this is an issue that all municipalities across the state are struggling with, and it's not because the cities are mismanaging their money, spending their money unwisely or on the wrong things. Although maybe for some cities it is, but I can tell you for sure that Lathrup is not one of those cities. Our treasurer and our city administrator are pretty hawkish with the tax dollars that we receive. So there's not a lot of waste there. But what it's really due to is the fact that we're not getting the revenue that we used to get. The revenue is way down, and there are a variety of reasons why the revenue is down, and namely falls into Proposition A, Headley, reductions in state shared revenue, and the 2008 real estate crash. And again, I'm going to talk about this real briefly, nothing like what I did last year, but just to kind of give you a sense of how these various factors play into the fact that we now have, very poor road conditions. And so the first one that I want to talk about here is Proposal A. And Proposal A is a tax law that basically limits the growth in your taxable value. So regardless of how well your property is increasing in value, your taxable value only increases at a small level based on Proposal A. And so in 2007, we had the highest taxable value as a city that we had. But then, as we know, in 2008, we had the real estate crash, and property values didn't start to go up again until 2014. So from 2007 to 2014, the city lost $75 million in aggregate taxable value. So let that sink in for a second. That's a huge amount of money for a small city like us. And what that did is that translated to a loss of between 40 and 50% of our revenue. So, think about operating your own households on half the revenue. If you did, some discretionary spending would have to go. And for municipalities like Lathrup, one of the discretionary expenditures that had to basically end was spending money on the roads, because we just didn't have the money to do that. Many other things as well, but the roads were one of the areas that took a big hit. And as I mentioned, the Proposition A only lets your taxable value grow a very small amount from year to year. So in 2008 we had this huge crash where we lost half our value, but since we can only grow at a very small rate, even if the economy booms for the next 15 years, we're not going to hit our 2007 revenue levels until the early 2030s. So the combination of Proposal A and the 2008 market crash has made this problem something that's here to stay for quite a while. So again, because of Proposal A, we don't have the revenue that we used to have that allowed us to spend money maintaining and repairing our roads. So that's one, actually two factors, the Proposition A and the 2008 market crash. The second area that I mentioned was the Headley Amendment, which is another tax law. And basically what that does is in any year where the aggregate value, taxable value of the city increases, the city is required to decrease the millage rate that we assess so that we get no more revenue than we got in the prior year. And what really kind of sucks about that is that anytime we lower, because of an increase in taxable value, that we lower the millage rate, we can never raise it back up again. So over time, what happens is the millage rate can only go down. And so back in 2010, we set our chartered millage rate at 20 mills. And in 2014, property values started going up, and they've been going up ever since. And so we've had a corresponding drop in our millage rate, and so our millage rate has gone down all the way to 18 mills now. So we've actually lost about 10% of our ability to tax our residents and gain revenue. So again, that's less revenue that we're getting, 10% less than we were getting in 2010 that we could be spending on the roads. And the only way to really increase our revenue is to build new buildings. And a city like Lathrup, where we're totally built out and we have no free land, that can't happen. So our revenue is going to remain flat. In fact, we'll keep losing revenue because of Headley. And the one thing that's kind of interesting here is since 2003, the average Lathrup Village homeowner has been undertaxed due to Headley by about $3,000. And if you multiply that times the 1,700 homes that we have in Lathrup, that almost pays for this entire proposal that we're putting on the ballot. So again, you can see how the lost revenue, has hurt us in terms of our ability to maintain our roads. And then the last one that I want to talk about here is state shared revenue. So essentially what's been happening in the last couple decades is that the state of Michigan has been balancing its own budget on the backs of the municipalities by not sharing revenue that they're required to give the cities. And there's been a whole lot of lawsuits about this, and they're still going on. But the long and the short of it is since 2001, the city has received $2.46 million less than they were supposed to have received from the state. So again, another hit to our revenue that's limited our ability to discretionary spend like the roads. In fact, Michigan is actually dead last across all 50 states in terms of how much money the state is giving the individual cities. Over the decade that ended in 2012, 46 of the states had increases in the revenue that they were giving the cities. There were only 4 that had decreases. Michigan was one of those 4, and they were the worst. We actually received 60% less over that decade than we did at the beginning of at the end of the decade than we did at the beginning of the decade. So really, Lathrop simply just does not have the revenue that we had 30 years ago, or even 5 or 10 years ago. So our discretionary funds that were used for road repair have all but since dried up. So that's those 4 factors are really what have gotten us in this situation over the years. And I talked about this last year too. When I have this discussion with people, one of the common things we hear is that, yeah, I understand all that, but we really pay high taxes here in Lathrop, and we do. All of us on council, we're taxpayers too, so we feel the same pain. But what you have to remember is where those tax dollars go. So when we write our checks to the city, immediately half of that goes away. It goes right to the schools. And so of that remaining half of that goes to public safety. So that's your police and fire. So now you're left with a quarter of that check that you sent to the city. And once the city uses that for all of the things that they have to do to operate the city, like snow removal and building maintenance and recreation and everything the city does, only about 2% of your check is left that can be discretionarily spent against for the roads. So if you think about it, if you pay $4,000 in taxes in the year, about $80 of that goes towards fixing the roads. So again, not a lot, and that's in fact why we have to always add additional money, to the tax money to try to do that small amount, that 0.4 miles of road. Okay. So that's a little bit of background. So what I want to do now is get into what is actually in the proposal that's on the ballot. And so the ballot proposal that you'll see on November 3rd or earlier if you're doing absentee voting only addresses the roads. Okay, and we really have 2 issues that we needed to take care of, the roads and the ditches. And so I'll come back and talk about the ditches a little bit later, but the ballot initiative only deals with the roads. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the committee, we actually developed 3 different proposals and narrowed them down through, town hall input and our own deliberations to the one proposal that's on the ballot. And that proposal that's on the ballot will address 7.1 miles of road, so residential road, so the streets, where the homes are, which is about 27% of our residential roadway. So we've got about 26.5 miles of residential local roadway. This will do 7.1 miles of it, or 27%. Those 7.1 miles would be repaired in a 3-year project that would start in the spring of 2021, so this coming spring. And it would be at a cost of just under $6 million, so $5.885 million. And that $5.85 million would be paid back by the residents and the businesses over a 10-year period. So the first thing I kind of want to point out, just on relative to some of the fundamentals, is we did pay a lot of attention to the perceptions and the feedback that we got after the last election, because you can see that this proposal is first off, it's a lot lower in scope. So if you remember, last year we were doing 26.5 miles of road. This year we're doing about a little over 7 miles. Last year it was just over $21 million in costs. Now we're just a little bit under $6 million. And also, if you remember, last year we were paying it back over 19 years versus 10 years in this proposal. So we did pay attention to what the residents were saying and tried to build a proposal, that was more palatable, to our residents. Now, in terms of the cost to individual residents, $1.8 million will equate to an additional 3.9176 mils, or essentially 3.9 mils, that's assessed to your home based upon your taxable value. And the key thing here to mention is that it's based on taxable value, not your actual value of your home. So for example, my home is probably worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000, but the taxable value, thanks to Proposition A, which we got done talking about a little bit earlier, is only about $65,000. So it's the $65,000 number that this 3.9 mils would be assessed against. Okay, and so to the average homeowner in Lathrup, and the average homeowner in Lathrup has a taxable value of $67,000, that would equate to about $262 per year, for 10 years. Okay, or another way to think about it, although we don't have a huge amount of homes that are over $100,000, but in taxable value, but for every $100,000 in taxable value, it would be $392. But one thing I do want to mention, I talked about fixlvroads.com a minute ago. If you go to fixlvroads.com, just like last year, there is a cost calculator, so you can pull up a map of the city, find your house, click on it, and it'll show you not only your current taxable value, but also the cost of the proposal based on your taxable value. So it basically does the math for you. So in terms of the specific streets, so we've got 26.5 miles of road, but we're only going to do 7. So obviously the big question is which 7.1 miles of roads are we going to do? And basically what we've done is we've created a category of eligible roads, and those eligible roads were made from a pool of streets, of asphalt streets that require either full reconstruction or rehabilitation, and I'll talk more about what that means here in a second. So if I go to the next slide here, these bullet points here kind of show how we came up with the 7.1 miles as well as the the associated $5.85 million in cost. So we have about 3.9 miles of residential road that requires 1A reconstruction. And 1A reconstruction is when we actually have to replace the entire road. So we have to take out the top 5 inches of asphalt, and the 10 inches of material that's below it is all degraded, so we got to dig all that out, and we have to replace the whole thing. It's by far the most expensive reconstruction or repair method. And as I said, we've got 3.9 miles of roadway that fall into that category. So we proposed as a committee that we would do about 2/3 of that. So we would pick about 2.6 miles of those 3.9 miles and repair them. Similarly, we've got 1 mile of road that falls into 1B reconstruction. 1B reconstruction is when the top 5 inches of asphalt are bad, but the material underneath is good. So all we really need to do in that case is replace the top 5 inches of asphalt. So we've got only 1 mile that falls into that category, and so what we're saying is we'll do about 60% of that, about 0.6 miles. And then the majority of our bad roads, fall into the 1C rehabilitation, and that's where we can skim off the top 3.5 inches of asphalt and pour 3.5 more inches of new asphalt and get that road back up to acceptable condition. And so we've got 4.4 miles in that category, and we propose to do about 75% of that. So that's another 3.7 miles. And then lastly, we've got just under 2 miles of gravel roads. And again, last year, we were proposing doing all the gravel roads. We took some feedback from that, and so we stripped it way down and are proposing to just do a small amount of the gravel roads, about 0.2 miles. And so when you add that all up, what you get is 11 miles that are eligible and 7.1 miles of road that we're actually going to repair, okay? And so what's going to happen is each fall, winter, prior to each of the 3 construction seasons, the infrastructure committee will meet and determine which roads will get done in that subsequent summer. We'll pass that on to City Council as a recommendation, and then City Council will make the final approval. Okay. So yeah, and I guess the only other thing I want to mention here, because I know we always get asked that, the $5.85 million does include a 15% contingency for unexpected costs that we might run into. It also includes about $120,000 for inflation and all of our finance fees. So the estimate should be a pretty solid estimate. So just to summarize, we would be doing 7.1 miles over a 3-year project starting in the spring. That costs about $5.85 million, which equates to 3.9 mils, which to the average homeowner is about $262 a year, and that would be paid back over a 10-year period. So again, a lot less extreme than what we had last November. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions about that when we get into the Q&A piece here. So that's the roads. So the other part of our issue is the ditches. And we as the infrastructure committee, we were tasked with coming up with a solution with fixing not only our roads but also our ditches, and the two of them are very intertwined in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, ditch repair is a much more complex issue without a really good one-size-fits-all approach, which we kind of found out as we went through a whole host of variations of how we might approach ditch repair. But our ultimate goal was to do as much ditch repair as we can, during this 3-year project. And as we talked about a few minutes ago, without doing ditch repair, we lose potentially about 10% of our road life, because again, the water sits in the ditches, seeps underneath the roads, and degrades the roads from underneath. And so we're not getting, without putting a brand new road on a completely non-functioning ditch would mean that we wouldn't get the full life out of that road. And if it's about 10%, if you think about the fact that this project is $5.85 million, we would potentially be wasting about $585,000 of taxpayer dollars without simultaneously addressing the ditches. And when we talked about this in our committee meetings, we had a lot of input, especially with respect to the ditches, from the residents, and they were pretty adamant, as was I think our committee, that it really didn't make sense to do roads without doing the ditches. And the recommendation from the residents in some of our discussions was to we should do the 7.1 miles of ditches that are associated with those 7.1 miles of road, so that we maximize the efficiency of the tax dollars that we're using on that project. So that was one thing that we kind of took away from the residents. The other was that fixing the ditches should happen simultaneously with fixing the roadways. We had talked a lot about potential ditch solutions of doing standalone ditch projects, but the residents really felt that, again, as did the committee, that we should really do those simultaneously, because there's a lot of overlap between those projects that can incite a lot of savings for the residents, actually significant savings. And the example that I always throw out is, with a standalone ditch project, the most expensive part of that project is replacing the non-functional driveway culverts. Because what you have to do is you have to break out part of the driveway approach, dig up the culvert, and again, the culvert is just the tube that goes underneath the driveway to carry the water from one side to the next. But you have to break up the concrete, dig out the culvert, put the new culvert in, and then repave the driveway approach. Well, in a lot of instances, you have to do that same thing when you build the new road, because the height of the new road doesn't match the height of the driveway approach. So a lot of times you have to break out part of the driveway approach and repave it. So rather than doing that twice, you could do it once and save the residents a lot of money. So it was really felt that it made sense to do the ditch portion simultaneous with the road work. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. But the ditch repair that we're talking about is no different than what we talked about last year. It includes regrading the ditch, each street's ditch system, so that you have proper water flow, so that the water flows from one end of the street to the other, and it's unimpeded and flows correctly. It also includes replacing non-functional driveway culverts. Again, the tube that goes under the ground. Some of those are damaged, or they've heaved, so they've moved essentially through the freeze-thaw cycle, have moved their way up, and so now the water doesn't get to them to go to the other side. Functional driveway culverts would get jet cleaned, so basically cleaning out the inside so that the water flows unimpeded. And then in some instances, there are some extended culverts, and we would jet clean those as well. Okay. So basically, what we're proposing for the ditches is that we're only going to repair the ditches associated with those with this project, associated with the 7.1 miles of road that's getting repaved. And the thing that I want to make sure that's crystal clear. The millage that we talked about earlier, the 3.9 mils, that's for the roads only, and that's something that everybody in the city would pay, businesses and residents. And that would pay to fix the roads. The roads are a community asset. Everybody uses the roads, so everybody would be paying the same 3.9 mils for that. But the ditch repair would be an extra cost, and it would be only for those residents who have the roads repaired. Okay, so only those 7.1 miles of road that get repaired, those people would have to repair, or their ditches would be repaired. And the actual cost of repairing a given street's ditch would be split evenly among those residents on that particular street. Okay, so it's going to be the actual cost of fixing that ditch would then be split evenly. So, and it would be repaid via special assessment that residents would have up to 10 years to pay off that special assessment. Okay, and the approach that we took, that addresses a lot of the equity issues that we heard loud and clear last November. So for starters, everybody on the street is going to pay the same amount. You're not going to have situations where one house is paying 3 times as much as the other. So because the cost of fixing that ditch system is going to be divided, for that street is going to be divided by the homes on that street. And then you're also only paying for your, basically direct ditch system that you're using. We had a lot of complaints about the proposal last year. People said things like, well, the people on our street take care of our ditches and they're flowing fine. Why should we pay for other people's ditches? Or, our ditches are in fairly good shape, but why are we paying for somebody else's ditches that are a mess? So the way that we structured this, kind of deals with those equity issues. And so from a cost estimate perspective, I mean, generally, streets that have more homes are going to have lower costs because they have more homes to split the cost among, relative to same-size streets that have fewer homes, and bigger lots. That would cost them a little bit more. And then streets with non-functional ditch systems, it's probably going to cost more because there's going to be a lot of work that has to be done to those ditch systems, whereas streets that have relatively functional ditch systems, might not cost a lot for that street at all. I think of my street, it really kind of falls into that example, although I'm not one of the eligible streets for repair. Our ditch system across the street from where I live, all the water flows down towards one house, but that one house has a major root. And, other than that root, the ditch system works fine on that side of the street. So the cost of repairing, that portion of the ditch system wouldn't be all that expensive. So it will depend on the condition of the ditch system on the individual streets. Okay. So in terms of what that potential cost will be, for 83% of the homeowners, we've calculated that the average estimated cost would be about $223 per year. And again, that's based on a 10-year special assessment. So again, that would be additional to the millage rate just for those people who have their roads repaired. Okay. Now the other 17%, and I mentioned up front that the ditch issue was a little bit more complex. The other 17%, those are areas where we have very few homes. So you might have like an intro into or ingress into the subdivision where there's only one or two homes, but it's a long stretch, where you end up having prohibitively high costs with respect to repairing the ditches. We saw some examples where, there are only 2 or 3 homes, and those homeowners would end up having to pay, over $4,000 a year for 10 years, which is obviously cost prohibitive and something that we wouldn't do. So we do have, for those 17%, we do have some ways of creating some creative solutions. In some instances, it will make logical sense because their ditch systems are connected with adjacent streets that are going to be done, that we can create a special assessment district that includes, those 2 or 3 houses that are in kind of off on their own, to kind of bring those costs in line. But the one thing that we did recommend to council, we did put in our recommendation, and council did approve the recommendation, is that we're not going to require any street to repair their ditches if the cost exceeds $400 per year. So we did kind of put a cap on it. But again, we're talking about 17%, and actually it'll probably be less than 17% because, like I said, we can come up with some creative solutions for some of those homes in that 17% of the area. Okay, so just to summarize again, the millage is only for, or the millage is paid by everybody, and it's only for the roads. And the ditch repair is an extra cost only for those residents whose streets are repaired, and the actual cost of fixing that street's ditches is split evenly among the homes on that street over a 10-year special assessment. Okay. Couple of other ancillary points that I do want to bring up about the ditches, though. If a street is designated for road repair and they successfully move to block the special assessment district process, so when we set up the special assessment districts for a given street to repair the ditches, with any special assessment, there's actually a public hearing that takes place. And if more than 50% of the people that are in that special assessment district come to council during the public hearing and say they don't want that project to be done, then it kills that special assessment district, and that project doesn't happen. And so if a street that's designated for road repair moves to successfully block the ditch portion of the project, that road will be dropped from the repaving schedule, and substituted with a different road. And the reason why we decided to do that, and again recommended it to council and council approved it, was because by putting a brand new road on a street that doesn't have a functioning ditch, we talked about the fact that we're not going to get the full life out of the road. So it's an inefficient use of taxpayer dollars, and we didn't think that was appropriate. However, on the flip side, because the special assessment process is a somewhat laborious process administratively, one of the things that we wanted to offer as an incentive is any street that brings a signed petition from the residents on that street to the city clerk that indicates support for a ditch special assessment, and I should say any eligible street, any of the 11 miles that's eligible, for street repair. If they bring a signed petition to the city clerk saying that they would support a ditch special assessment, we will bump them up in the priority in the selection process. So we'll give them increased priority. So we've got 11 total miles of road, only 7.1 miles will be selected for repair. That street would be bumped up, and it might make it more likely that they fall into the 7.1 miles as opposed to the 4 miles that gets excluded. So that is something that streets can do proactively to help increase their priority. Also want to mention that streets that are not eligible and not on the repaving list, they still can request a special assessment for their ditches. We actually have a few streets that are talking about doing that. And the advantage of making that request during the 3-year period of this proposed project is that labor and machinery and material are already mobilized. So the cost of repairing your ditch system would be significantly lower than, say, if you wait 5 years down the road when all that material and labor and machinery would have to be moved. It's not on site and would have to be moved here. So for those streets that are thinking about potentially they're not going to be repaved, but still thinking potentially about fixing their ditch system, now would be a great time to do it, assuming that this proposal passes. Like the particular roads, the infrastructure committee will also design and recommend the special assessment districts to city council. And then the last thing just to mention is we were fully cognizant of the fact that we have, I never changed the slide here, did I? Oh, okay, I'll come back to that. We're fully cognizant of the fact that we're only addressing 7 miles out of 26 miles of ditches. And so one of the things that we recommended was to use our newly increased code enforcement resources to kind of assess the ditches of the other 19 miles, the 19 miles that won't get addressed, to look for obvious issues, things like, tree roots or, blocked culverts or debris in the ditches. And while that won't bring the remaining ditches back to new condition, it should help the overall function of the ditch system, okay? And I noticed that I forgot to show a couple of slides, so I did want to point this slide out here. We talked about the fact that, only certain roads are eligible. So this map here shows what those eligible roads are, and this map is on fixlvroads.com, so it gives you the ability to look and see which streets are eligible in that 11-mile pool. And it also shows you, based on the color coding, which streets are, a full reconstruction, partial reconstruction, and rehab. And then this again gives the key information about the ditch repair. Okay. All right. One last point I want to make, and then I'll open it up. Just kind of an unrelated point, but it is an advantage to having a local road project like we're proposing. One of the things, as a city that we own are the major roads. So we own, as a city, we own part of Evergreen, and we own all of 11 Mile that goes through Lathrup. And sometime in the next several years, probably within the next 3 years, we're going to have to repave 11 Mile Road, and we're on the hook for that because we own that road. And right now, the estimated cost for that is about $1.3 million. And one of the things that we do is every year we get what's called Act 51 dollars. So that's money from the state that's designated specifically for use for our roads. And the way that they give us that money is 75% of it is designated to be used on major roads, and 25% of it is designated to be used on local roads. And so every year when we traditionally do that 0.4 miles of road, we take the tax money that we have left over, and we add to it the local road money, and we still don't have enough to do those 0.4 miles of road. So what we do, we're allowed to apply to transfer a small amount of that major road money over to the local fund. And we do that every year so that we can afford to do those 0.4 miles of road. But by having a local road project in place, we won't have to make that transfer every year for 3 years. And what that's going to do is allow us to save all of our major road Act 51 money, so that we have a bigger balance in there, so that when we do get to having to repave 11 Mile Road, we have more money available and ready to pay for that project. So that's another advantage of any local road project that we would approve on the ballot like this. Okay. So let me I'm going to open it up now for the committee members and the advisors. If any of you have any comments that you want to add, or if I've misstated anything or forgotten anything, please feel free to correct me. So Cheryl, can you unmute their mics if they're not already unmuted? And if you guys have anything that you want to add, please do.
Bruce, it's Mike Keenan. I don't have anything to add. Good job on summarizing everything. Short.
All right, thanks, Mike. Anyone else?
I concur with Mike. Awesome job.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, then what I'm going to do next is we're going to open it up for questions and answers and comments. For those of you that are participating via Zoom, what you need to do is raise your hand. So on the toolbar, you can select the raise your hand button or line item, and it'll let the moderator know that you want to speak. Alternatively, you can also hit the Alt key on your keyboard and then the Y is in yellow, and that'll also raise your hand. And for those of you that may be on the phone only, if you want to raise your hand, the way that you can do that is hit the asterisk key followed by the 9 key, the number 9, and that'll let the moderator know that you want to speak. And then what'll happen is she will unmute you guys one at a time so that you can ask your questions, make your comments. You can also put, if you're on Zoom, you can type in the chat section if you have questions or comments you want to put there. And then the other thing, just to say that we're limiting comments to 3 minutes per person. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to say, go ahead and raise your hand now, and the moderator can then unmute your mic. Cheryl, it looks like Mike Griffin's raising his hand.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mike.
Finally, geez. I've been trying to get my microphone to work for forever here. I think I finally figured it out. Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. So you were talking about the roads where there weren't many houses. They might have been like the major egress roads or whatever. And if I don't remember what the if there's only a few houses and the city says, oh well, 400, we're going to cap that at $400. Do the ditches get done anyway, or do they not get done? In that
no, they don't. At least if I remember correctly, they don't get done because I mean the problem is who's going to pay for them. That was when we were, if you remember the one meeting we had where we looked at the per street costs,
Right.
and we were trying to brainstorm on how to deal with that. Yeah, so, I think in some situations, it's not only the ingress roads, it's sometimes like when you're, like if you're looking at, I'm trying to think of an example, like, what are two streets? Mike, what's the next one up from Saratoga, north or south?
South is San Jose.
San Jose. Okay, so let's say you've got San Jose and Saratoga, they're parallel, and then you come up on Bloomfield, and you may have one or two houses on Bloomfield on that little stretch. Well, if we're doing Saratoga or San Jose, we could potentially add those to let's say we're doing San Jose, we could add those to San Jose because the ditches are actually contiguous. They're contiguous around that corner like that. So there is some opportunity to bring some of those back into the fold, but we won't know that until we actually get into the special assessment process.
Right. Okay. So, because my question was, I guess, is if the city is going to do them anyway, could they assess just $400 per house and then, kind of pick up the rest, or.
Yeah, I remember we kind of looked at that. Remember, we were kind of looking at like some creative solutions, like I think the one that we talked about at one point was adding like a portion of a mill into the millage rate, and then using that as a fund to help pay for those that were over $400. But it turned out that we needed way more than it would have raised the millage rate much higher to be able to do that. But I think that's why we ended up saying we capped it at 400 and said we just wouldn't do it. Unless those people wanted to do it, right? If they wanted to do it, we would still do it.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess the last question I have is, what is the status of Santa Barbara? I know at one time it had been mentioned that it originally was going to be done, like maybe the full length next year, but that was kind of off the table. Is it going to be the sections that are kind of half fixed right now? Are they going to be done, the worst ones, next year, or is that going to wait until section gets picked up in the road millage proposal?
Yeah. So what we had planned, and I'll let Scott add on to this too. But what we had planned to do is use this year's money and next year's money together to do most of Santa Barbara. But when COVID hit, we lost a lot of money as the city, a lot of revenue because of that. And we did not have enough money to do a road project this summer. So we are still planning on, at least Scott talk about that, but we are still planning on doing Santa Barbara next summer. Scott, anything you want to add to that?
No, you're pretty much right there. It's not all of Santa Barbara, though. I think it's about from San Quentin north to La Crosse, which were the Pacer ratings were, I think, 2 and 3 on there.
Yeah. So right now, if this were to be voted down, that would be the road project for next year. And I guess if this were approved, I guess that would. Well, I guess we'd have to talk about it. Whether or not, if this were approved, do we still do the planned project, or do we do the project as part of this project? I'm guessing we're already moving forward with this anyways, right, Scott?
Yeah, we have paving plans already done.
Yeah.
On that segment.
Yeah. So my guess is we would probably do this either way, and then if this is approved, then we would just add probably do 1.5 miles to 2 additional miles next year as part of the 7.1. Any other questions? I know we got a few other people that are on the line. I mean, I guess, Cheryl, why don't you just unmute everybody's phone or everybody's mic? I mean, we've only got three non-committee members on, so that way, if they have questions, they can just.
Everyone is unmuted.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, was somebody saying something?
So now I have to go to a quiet spot. You showed a map that had all the roads. Was there a map that showed just the roads here to the 17 miles?
Just the roads that are potential. Hang on, my screen just I've just lost it on my screen. Give me one sec. Let me share it again. Yeah. So you're talking about this map right here?
Oh, is that okay? That is the 7.1. Okay.
Yeah. So that particular map, and you can probably see it a little better on fixlvroads.com. But basically the colored sections make up the 11 miles total. So there's looks like there's blue, orange, and green, and
Yeah,
the different.
I only saw a glimpse of it before, so I didn't notice that they all weren't colored. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the gray ones are the ones that aren't eligible.
Yep. So I happen to be on a corner. I'm on two of those roads that are colored.
Yeah. So what would happen in that case if one side gets paved, then that side of the ditch would be done, but the other side wouldn't.
Yeah. I have culverts on both sides, both roads.
Yeah. There's definitely quite a few people in that same situation.
Okay.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for coming out.
I will ask one more, and that is, we have a lot of heaving sidewalks. What's being done to the sidewalks?
So as far as the sidewalks go, about a year ago, the infrastructure committee made a recommendation to council that was accepted for a sidewalk program. And what the program basically said is in the first year, we're going to address the sidewalks on the business corridors. So basically 11 mile, 12 mile, and Southfield Road. So we would basically, identify the flags or the blocks that need to be repaired or replaced. Notify in that case, the business owners, and then we'll contract with a company to allow them to do it at a bulk discounted rate, although they have the option of doing it on their own to do the repair. And then after that, each of the next 4 years, we'll do one quadrant of the city. And we had intended to start this year, but the COVID kind of set us back, and the special assessment process took us a little while to figure out, because we haven't really done a major one in about 10 years. So it's actually not going to start until next spring. And actually, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl, but I think what we decided was next year what we'll do is we'll do the business corridor and one of the 4 quadrants. So essentially making up for the year that we lost this year. Is that correct, Cheryl?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's the sidewalks are a big problem too. I'm a very frequent walker. I walk 2.5 miles every day in the city, and yeah, I trip at least once a week. So.
You identified the quadrant to be done next year?
Cheryl, have we identified that yet, or no?
No, we have not yet.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Going once, twice, 3 times? All right, everybody, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate your time, and, let other residents know. We've got another one coming up on Thursday, so hopefully we'll get some people there as well, and let's get the word out. All right, have a good afternoon, everybody.